When you first started saying, "Hey, the guy Donald Trump should not be leading our country or our party," were you surprised that at the vitriol that was directed at you?
No, because that's what he does. I mean, look, he's built a cult. He's really built a cult of personality. And when you go after the leader of a cult, it's almost like going after somebody's religion, because this is what they have taken. Everything they do is built on this idea that Donald Trump's going to save America. So
Remember when Trump used to brag about being the strongest, smartest, and most beloved man in the room? Well, Adam Kinzinger just exposed him as a weak, tantrum-throwing diva. Based on Trump's furious response, Kinzinger definitely hit a nerve. Let's dive into exactly what he said that shook the internet.
Personal attacks against you and promises of retribution, not to mention many death threats that you have received since you have been speaking out. You say that you have zero fear of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Why?
Look,
How, I should say.
I've been to war, okay? Donald Trump, I'm not trying to just be partisan shots here. He is a small, weak man who is scared to death of people. He's scared to death of strong people. And so for me, I refuse to be intimidated.
Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss this. Donald Trump just got absolutely roasted. And let's just say, he's not taking it well. Former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger compared him to a wrestling character, minus the muscles, charisma, or real toughness. Kinzinger ripped into Trump, calling him softer than a microwave marshmallow with a tough guy act faker than a reality show stunt. Trump has built a brand on looking like the biggest, toughest guy in the room, at least on camera. He's marketed himself as the billionaire genius who wins at everything, a fearless titan who never backs down.
The Republican Party is no longer conservative. It has switched its allegiance from the principles that gave it purpose to a man whose only purpose is himself. Donald Trump is a weak man pretending to be strong. He is a small man pretending to be big. He's a faithless man.
For a while, the act worked. Gold-plated towers, the Apprentice boardroom, the dramatic slow-motion escalator entrance. It all screamed power. Trump sold the idea that he wasn't just another politician, but a self-made mogul who bulldozed his way to the top through sheer dominance. Forget the bankruptcies, unpaid contractors, or the fact that his success started with a multi-million-dollar boost from his father, Fred. What mattered was the myth, and that myth was airtight.
If Donald Trump gets the Republican nomination, there are many of us that will move heaven and earth to ensure he doesn't win. I think that's the most important thing. He cannot be president again.
The secret behind all of this wasn't actual strength. It was spectacle. Trump didn't need to be a tough guy. He just needed to look like one. He understood that if you repeat something loudly and often enough, people start to believe it. He ran his campaign like a professional wrestling promo, constantly amplifying his larger-than-life persona. He became the ultimate showman, the guy who could turn any moment into a headline, any insult into a catchphrase, and any debate into a reality TV shooting leader who didn't follow the rules. The carefully crafted tough guy image made him seem untouchable, the kind of leader who could bulldoze the political establishment and bring America back to its so-called glory days. Never mind that his toughness mostly involved yelling at reporters, mocking disabled people, and rage tweeting at 3 a.m. to his followers. To them, he was a warrior. It was a persona that thrived in controlled settings, on stage at rallies, where he was invincible.
As a military guy, I've always respected strength in leadership. And Trump is the opposite of that. He's a whiny, weak, small, tiny man who is scared to death.
Behind the scenes, the story was quite different. The so-called alpha male constantly sought praise, needed cards to remember basic empathy, and spent more time glued to cable news than actually running the country. The biggest trick of all was convincing people that his wealth and business success were proof of his power. In reality, the Trump empire was built on smoke and mirrors, overinflated valuations, failed ventures, and a long history of dodging financial disasters. For someone who spent years branding himself as the toughest, smartest, and strongest leader the world had ever seen, he sure had a lot of moments that suggested otherwise. Fast forward a few decades, and the discomfort around actual tough guys became even more evident. There he was standing next to real blue-collar workers, the kind of people he claimed to champion. You could almost see the panic in his eyes. These were men who built things with their hands, came home with grease on their clothes, and had sore backs from a hard day's work. And here was Trump, gripping his hard hat like it might bite him, clearly unfamiliar with the concept of manual labor. It was the same energy as a rich kid forced into a summer job by his parents. Awkward, disconnected, and just a little bit afraid.
Republicans who are not speaking out, who feel this way?
Oh, there's so many of them. And that's the thing is like, people will tell me sometimes like, Adam, you're courageous. And I appreciate it. I'm not courageous though. I'm surrounded by cowards. So
then came the infamous handshakes. Oh, the handshakes. In Trump's mind, a handshake was a dominance move, a chance to assert power. But the execution, a bizarre mix of yanking, squeezing, and refusing to let go, as if he thought he could physically drag someone into submission. Strong leaders command respect naturally, but Trump looked more like he was trying to win an arm wrestling contest with world leaders. And sometimes it backfired spectacularly, like when French President Emmanuel Macron gripped back with enough force to turn it into a passive-aggressive power struggle. But perhaps the biggest tell of all was his desperate need for loyalty. Real strength doesn't demand constant validation, it earns it. Yet Trump spent an embarrassing amount of time whining about people not being loyal enough. Whether it was cabinet members, former allies, or even his own vice president, anyone who dared to disagree instantly became an enemy. The man who bragged about toughness seemed oddly fragile whenever someone hit him with a little truth. For someone obsessed with appearing powerful, Trump sure spent a lot of time proving he wasn't. And that's the thing. His tough guy act was never meant for the real world. It works in a scripted environment where everyone's in on the act. The punches don't land, the rivalries are written, and even the most vicious enemies shake hands backstage. But what happens when someone tries to bring that same energy into actual leadership?
Crying Adam Kinzinger, he's a super crier. I never saw the guy not crying. He's always crying. I looked at him, I remember years ago, he was actually on my side. And then one day, when you don't want to kill people in wars, they turn.
Trump's version of strength wasn't about resilience or real grit. It was about spectacle. In the safety of his own rallies, he could stand at the podium, point at journalists and call in the enemy. He could mock opponents, dish out schoolyard nicknames, and slap his name on anything that stood still long enough. But take him out of that controlled environment, and suddenly, the tough guy act started to look flimsy. A real strong leader doesn't need a hyped crowd to function. Trump, on the other hand, treated every joke, every fact check, every mild rebuke like a steel chair to the face. Late-night hosts made fun of him, and instead of brushing it off, he rage-tweeted in the middle of the night. A former ally criticized him, and suddenly that person was weak, washed up, or disloyal. The man couldn't handle a joke without threatening legal action, but sure, he was full of alpha male energy. Then there were the interviews, the real-world equivalent of stepping into the ring with an actual fighter. The thing exposed the gap between the act and reality quite like an actual crisis. The moment required true leadership, and instead, Trump gave us rambling press conferences, Sharpie-edited weather maps, and bizarre personal grievances injected into national emergencies. When the WWE lights were on, he could sell the illusion of dominance, but when faced with a pandemic, protests, or international tensions, all that bravado vanished. He wasn't the guy throwing people through tables. He was the guy hiding behind the curtain, waiting for someone else to take charge. Then came the moment that cracked the illusion wide open. Adam Kinzinger, a former Republican congressman and military veteran, delivered a takedown that even Trump's usual bravado couldn't mask. It wasn't just another insult. It was a direct hit to the one thing Trump had always clung to, the myth of his toughness. For all the bluster, the posturing, and the red meat rally speeches about strength and dominance, Kinzinger pointed out the obvious. Trump's whole act was just that, an act. This one stung in a way others hadn't.
And shame. I mean, it's like, it's not, I don't know if it's diaper, if it's like.
You don't think it's the face, that whatever he's putting on his
could
face?
Could be the face, could be the
sweat mixed with that, yeah.
The sweat. Here's the important thing about this, Tim, is MAGA sees Donald Trump. Now, we've got to put ourselves in this mind for a second, as almost a non-human entity. And I'm serious about this. Like, he is. Everything about him is almost non-human. Like, honestly, if they saw him sitting on the toilet, it would shatter their...
Trump could handle being called a liar. He practically made it a job requirement. He could brush off accusations of corruption, having skated around those for decades. But being called weak, that was different. It was personal. This was the man who spent his entire career convincing the world he was the ultimate alpha male, the master dealmaker, the one who alone could fix everything. And now a fellow Republican had just pulled back the curtain and exposed what was really there. A man more focused on performative toughness than actual resilience. And of course, Trump reacted exactly how you'd expect, full meltdown mode. The all-caps social media posts came rolling in, packed with wild insults, conspiracy theories, and the usual greatest hits. Loser, rhino, failed congressman. But here's the thing. For all the noise, he never actually responded to the substance of what Kinzinger said. Not once did he argue why he wasn't the soft, whiny caricature Kinzinger had painted him as. Because how could he? What was he going to do? Prove he wasn't thin-skinned by throwing yet another tantrum. The irony was too rich to ignore. A man who constantly bragged about his strength, his toughness, and his ability to dominate any situation was now throwing a fit because someone called him out for not being any of those things. It was like watching a guy who insists he's the fastest runner alive trip over his own shoelaces in the middle of a race. And the public, oh, they noticed.
For a pardon, it was preemptive just in case Trump's Justice Department goes after you and other members of the January 6th committee. What was your reaction when you saw Trump's post last night declaring your preemptive pardon void and vacant?
Well, first off, I'm trying to figure out what he's trying to distract from, because that's what all this is, always a distraction to try to get people's attention, or maybe he hasn't felt like he's gotten enough attention. But look, Jake, it's like